Airports are places of chaos and excitement, a hub of human interaction where the extraordinary often collides with the mundane. It was on a transcontinental flight from New York to Los Angeles that a peculiar and unforgettable drama unfolded in the first-class cabin. At the center of it was a man named Philip, an outspoken tech critic with a flair for arrogance, and an unassuming passenger who turned out to be none other than Elon Musk himself. Philip had boarded the plane with an air of entitlement, his crisp business suit and leather briefcase hinting at his self-perceived importance. He prided himself on being a truth-teller in the world of technology, often belittling figures like Musk in his articles and podcasts. As he settled into his luxurious seat, he couldn't help but notice the man seated beside him, casually dressed in jeans and a hoodie, with a baseball cap pulled low over his face. To Philip, this man seemed out of place among the elite travellers in first class. The way he fumbled with his seatbelt and asked the flight attendant basic questions about the menu only reinforced Philip's assumption that this stranger had stumbled into first class by accident. Perhaps, he mused, the man was a lottery winner treating himself to a one-time indulgence. "First time flying first class?" Philip asked, his tone dripping with condescension. The man looked up and smiled politely. "Not exactly," he replied, his voice calm and unassuming. As the flight took off and dinner was served, Philip couldn't resist showing off his knowledge. When the conversation turned to technology and space exploration, a topic sparked by a news segment playing on the in-flight screens, Philip launched into a tirade about the arrogance of billionaires and the overhyped nonsense of companies like Tesla and SpaceX. "Take Elon Musk, for example," Philip said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, leaning back in his seat with an air of authority. "He's nothing more than a glorified salesman. All his so-called innovations are built on the backs of real engineers who do the hard work while he takes the credit. You think he's the one designing rockets or assembling cars? Please. He's just the face of the operation, the guy who knows how to talk big and rake in the funding. And don't even get me started on his Twitter antics. Pure ego. It's like he's running a reality show rather than a business empire." Several passengers shifted in their seats, some pretending to watch their screens, while others covertly tuned into the conversation. Sensing an audience, Philip pressed on, his voice growing louder and more animated. "Let's talk about Tesla, shall we? Everyone acts like it's some revolutionary company, but the truth is, Tesla didn't even invent electric cars. Companies like GM were experimenting with EVs decades ago. Musk just jumped on the bandwagon and marketed the hell out of it. Sure, the cars look sleek, but let's not ignore the endless production delays, the quality control issues, and those ridiculous promises about full self-driving technology. How's that working out? Oh, right, it isn't." The man next to him shifted slightly but said nothing, his calm demeanour contrasting sharply with Philip's escalating tirade. Philip, emboldened by the lack of pushback, turned his attention to SpaceX. "And SpaceX? Don't even get me started on that circus. Reusable rockets? Fine. I'll give him credit for the idea, but at what cost? Billions in taxpayer dollars funneled into his little science projects, while actual space programs are underfunded. And let's not forget all the failures, the crashes, the explosions. For every success, there's a dozen disasters swept under the rug. People act like he's single-handedly taking humanity to Mars. But let's be real. He's selling pipe dreams to starry-eyed investors." Philip's rant took a sharper turn as he moved to Musk's acquisition of Twitter. And now he's buying Twitter, of all things, as if we needed more of his influence in the public sphere. He thinks he's some champion of free speech. But all I see is a billionaire, throwing tantrums and meddling in things he doesn't understand. The platform's already a mess, and he's only going to make it worse. He'll probably turn it into some kind of vanity project. Just like everything else he touches. He took a sip of his scotch, his face flushed with self-satisfaction. The problem is people like Musk surround themselves with yes-men. No one tells him when his ideas are bad, or downright dangerous. And the public eats it up because they're dazzled by his so-called genius. But let me tell you, the emperor has no clothes. Strip away the marketing, the hype, and the media circus. And what do you have? A man who's in way over his head. The cabin grew quieter as Philip's voice filled the space. Several passengers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of discomfort and curiosity. Still, the man sitting next to him remained silent, his face obscured by the brim of his baseball cap. Philip, mistaking his silence for agreement, leaned in slightly as if to drive his point home. "I mean, come on," he said, lowering his voice just enough to seem conspiratorial, while still audible to those around him. "Do people really think this guy is going to save the planet? Colonize Mars? He's just another billionaire selling promises he can't keep. The sad part is, people believe him. They actually believe him. And you know why? Because he's good at playing the role, the genius, the disruptor, the rebel. But that's all it is, a role. It's smoke and mirrors. The guy's a showman, not a savior." He paused, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, basking in what he imagined was the admiration of his fellow passengers. Little did he know, the silence in the cabin was less an endorsement of his opinions, and more an anticipation of what would happen next. The man beside him listened quietly, occasionally nodding but saying little. His restraint only emboldened Philip, who continued his monologue with increasing venom. "You know, people like Musk think they're untouchable," Philip scoffed. "But strip away the PR and he's just another guy who got lucky. I bet if I met him I'd wipe the floor with him in a debate." The man chuckled softly, which only irritated Philip further. "What's so funny?" Philip snapped. "Oh, nothing," the man replied, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Just interesting to hear such strong opinions." As the flight progressed, the tension in the cabin became palpable. Several passengers had tuned out their movies and conversations, subtly eavesdropping on the exchange. Philip, sensing he had an audience, leaned into his role as provocateur. He ranted about self-driving cars, reusable rockets, and cryptocurrency, each point laced with sarcasm. Finally, as the flight attendant came by with dessert, the man turned to Philip with a friendly smile. "You've got some valid points," he said. "But I wonder, how much of that is based on first-hand experience?" Philip smirked. "I've researched enough to know what I'm talking about. Besides, someone has to hold these tech moguls accountable." The man extended his hand. "Well, I appreciate your perspective. By the way, I'm Elon." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Philip stared at the hand, his face draining of colour as the weight of the revelation sank in. The murmurs of nearby passengers confirmed what he couldn't believe. He had spent the entire flight insulting Elon Musk to his face. Philip's arrogance crumbled into awkward silence. I didn't recognize you," he stammered, his bravado replaced with embarrassment. Musk shrugged, his demeanour as composed as ever. "No worries," he said. "Criticism is part of the job. But for what it's worth, I do work pretty hard. And so does my team." The rest of the flight was uneventful, at least outwardly. Philip avoided eye contact and barely touched his dessert while Musk returned to his laptop, typing away as if nothing had happened. Yet the tension lingered, a stark reminder of how quickly arrogance can backfire. By the time the plane landed in Los Angeles, Philip had learned a lesson in humility he wouldn't soon forget. As passengers disembarked, he hesitated before addressing Musk one last time. "For what it's worth," he said awkwardly, "I respect what you've accomplished. Maybe I should do more research." Musk smiled, offering a gracious nod. "Safe travels," he replied. As Philip walked through the terminal, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed an incredible opportunity, not just to meet a titan of industry, but to engage in a meaningful dialogue. Instead, his ego had led him to make a fool of himself in front of the very person he often criticized. This story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of arrogance and the value of humility. In a world where opinions are often expressed without thought or consequence, it's worth remembering that the people we judge from afar are, at the end of the day, just as human as we are. For Philip, it was a hard lesson learned at 35,000 feet, a lesson that would forever change the way he approached his work and his words.